Hello. It's all right. So, it is you.
Code Vein, the game that brings you the Dark Souls combat in an anime-themed world. I finally managed to beat this game after getting it about a year ago. The combat I found was great. The story, superb. The characters were really engaging in their ways. Did I mention that the character creation is massive in content? The ending? Well, I won't spoil anything related to that. Then there's the bosses. Oh man, some of these bosses are a challenge. Others, surprisingly, not as much. So, I'd like to bring you my take on which bosses I think were the easiest, and which gave me more trouble than I hoped for. Let me start by saying that I will only consider bosses who are either essential to the storyline, or who are a requirement in order to progress through a level, so no specifically infected lost will be accounted for in this list. Neither will bonus bosses who are in the challenge sections of the game. With that said, let's get into this and talk about some hard bosses. So number 1, I decided to put the Successor of the Ribcage, aka Aurora. I know, the Successors are supposed to be the hardest bosses in this game. However, this one surprisingly was not that. The pillars that are present within the area are great cover for almost all of her attacks. The real challenge is just trying to get close to her without getting hit by her wide range of elemental attacks. A lightning AoE, a projectile of fire, a laser beam that ignites the area it ignites, and a burst of blood which knocks you back. This fight definitely keeps you wary of what attacks are coming, and you definitely need to be aware of how to avoid them. What made this boss easy for me was that it seems she has a massive blind spot in the side of her body where none of her attacks can hit you. If you stay in front of her, you're going to get hurt, but move off to the side behind her front legs, and she can't seem to hit you. Sure, you have to fight her twice in the same instance, but her attacks don't change, which makes it rather easy to fight. Successor of the Ribcage, difficult boss if you can't really keep an eye on what attack she's about to use, but if you can manage to keep an eye on that, she's actually fairly easy to beat. I know what a lot of you are going to say about me putting the Successor of the Ribcage as the easiest boss.
I disagree.
Man, I love that. Anyway, number 2 is going to be the very first boss of the game, Oliver Collins. After teaming up with him, only to lose him 5 minutes later, Oliver Collins returns when you escape the underground ruins. Only this time, he's lost himself.
Once someone is lost, they can never come back.
His attacks are very reminiscent of your own movements when wielding a hammer. Slow, sluggish, and therefore very easy to avoid. When you eliminate about half of his health, he becomes corrupted and transforms into a giant enemy. His attack range is increased, but it all remains rather slow. The only challenge I got out of this fight was the fact that if you don't really play Souls types of games that often, it can be difficult to time your dodges if you haven't gotten used to the dodge mechanics. That's the only challenge I had when fighting Oliver, as I was relatively new to the game. But being the first boss of the game itself, he's relatively easy. If you can manage to avoid his attacks, which are slow to begin with, it's not very difficult to take him out. So, number 3. I decided to put an enemy that you find later in the game, near the end, but honestly you'd think later in the game you would find tough enemies, but this enemy was really just sort of symbolic rather than challenging. It's the Attendant of the Relics. Learning that Silva's Attendant is willing to fight you in order to protect her Attendant is pretty awesome. So I'm going to give her props for sticking to the duty she believes in. Sadly though, we have to defeat her. Her moves are pretty similar to Eo's as well as your character's. That makes this battle relatively easy. Focus her down with heavy attacks and she will fall with little effort. The only challenge to this fight is really how much health remains from the massive travel through the government building. Which, did I forget to mention, there are only 2 missile locations in this entire map, and they are on the opposite sides of the map? Like, come on. So yeah, if your health is low when you attempt this fight, you might be in trouble. If not, just slice your way through the one who will defend her successor to the end. She's not very difficult. Just stay on her and you can overpower her fairly easily. On my number 4 spot, I have the Insatiable Despot. Basically, this is just another Lost who is really massive and has no real special attacks or even debuffs, and is just a really heavy-hitting attacker. He changes his weapons from 2 blades to a halberd-type weapon by pulling the spear out of his own chest after you eliminate about half of his health. So that's where it can get a little bit challenging, is his attacks do get a little bit longer in range, but the damage is not really amplified all that much. The real challenge with this guy comes if you neglect the crystal that he pulls out of the ground. If you don't destroy it right away, then more enemies will begin to spawn from it and you'll quickly find yourself surrounded and outnumbered. Other than that, this boss is fairly easy to take out. He's a pretty standard attacker and doesn't really do all that much in terms of damage. Once you destroy the crystal, you should have no problems. Do that and you're pretty much in the clear. So number 5 on my list, I've put the Butterfly of Delirium, the second boss that you fight in the game. When I first fought this thing, my weapons weren't upgraded very well, so it was definitely a struggle for me at first to deal any sort of damage to it. The arena that it's in gives you more than enough room to move around, however, so breaking off to retreat and heal is relatively easy enough. However, this thing is capable of dashing around the entire map with a charge from its tail. So trying to retreat in order to heal can be very risky. Its attacks are quite fast, and this early on in the game, fast attacks from this thing can deal a lot of damage to you. Don't underestimate the poison that this thing can infect you with. It lingers for a very long time and takes a massive chunk of your health down with it. So having items or ways to cure the poison is really a necessity for this battle. Managing your health pool, avoiding this thing's fast attacks, and making sure you cure the poison from you whenever you can is the key to beating this boss. So number 6, the Successor of the Claw. Another Successor, and we're not even halfway through the list. This Successor was surprisingly not very difficult to fight. This Cat of Fire honestly was not really that much of a problem for me. Her attacks are pretty standard, and she doesn't have much in terms of special strengths. She can set an area of the arena on fire, which burns your health down if you're not careful and stand too long in it. As well, she also can place area of effect traps that explode after a short duration, so just make sure you're clear of all that. Conveniently, before this battle, you get the Frost Weapon buff effect and the Fire Resistance buff. So you gain defense against her attacks and a boost against her already weak defense. I was able to beat her on my first attempt. She can definitely be a challenge with the speed of her attacks and the area of fire that she lays down, but even with that, she's not very difficult to defeat. The main thing that you want to watch out for with this fight is her teleport dash ability. If you get hit by that, you're probably going to lose about half your health. If you manage to avoid it though, you should be in the clear. So number 7, I put the Queen's Knight Reborn. Really, this fight is just a repeat of the first time you face it, except this time, he teleports faster, his attacks do a little bit more damage, and he gets an aura buff that drains your Ichor if you stay too close to him. While his damage is increased and he's more teleport happy, he doesn't change his attack patterns at all from the first time you face him. If you remember how he attacks and recall how to dodge them, you should be in the clear with a fairly easy fight. Alright, next up on this list is the original Queen's Knight. Alright, we talked about this guy when you face him later in the game. Now, let's talk about him for real. When I first saw this thing, I was like, whoa, that is cool. Corrupted knight who has sworn service to defend his queen at all cost. He even has wings. Like, that's just awesome. For all the awesome aspects of this boss, he sure defends his queen with all he has. Teleporting consistently to keep you guessing on when he's going to strike is definitely a challenge. Heavy attacks from above that deal insane damage, a strike from the center of the map that disperses wave of blood energy in a wide area, and a shield which only enhances his defense. This boss is a challenge, and rightfully so. Knights were some of the strongest warriors in history. This boss reflects that even when corroded by poisoned blood, a knight will defend his queen to the very end. He served her well. So number 9, I put Successor of the Breath, or in other words, Nicola. Learning that this kid became a successor was really hard to face at first. However, you could definitely see his determination to protect his sister, Mia.
I have to keep Mia safe! I'm sorry, Nicola. I never realized that your sister is here now. I'm here!
Nicola, the Successor of the Breath, definitely gives you one good fight. His attacks are relatively close range though, so if you manage to keep your distance, you can actually bombard him with attacks from a safe spot. One thing you really want to watch out for is his shield charge attack. And be sure to never dodge backwards if possible, as most of his attacks will be followed by a series of ice spikes that will definitely punish you. Once he drops his shield, however, he gains access to his jetpack that's upon his back, and he uses it well. Leaping into the air to dish out a cone of damage and enhancing his mobility with spin attacks as well as faster charges. This boss will definitely keep you on your toes if you can't. This boss was definitely emotional and a fair challenge. Keeping your distance if possible and avoiding his ice spikes at all costs is sort of the key to victory. The only thing that really makes the Argent Wolf Berserker difficult is its location, as if going through that maze of a cathedral wasn't hard enough. Its location is past several cathedral guards who can actually deal some pretty high damage with their attacks. If you're not careful, you can easily have to use at least 2 healing items before you even get to this guy. Once there, however, you will face a condensed battleground against an enemy with very wide attacks. While it can be knocked down with an attack from behind, don't try this too often, because it can often hit you from behind, even if it's attacking from the front. The lack of health regeneration that you can possibly have when facing this boss makes it a challenge. He also gains bonus resistances to certain elemental attacks after being taken down to about half of his health. The timing of this boss gives you a definite challenge. The condensed area also makes this fight difficult. But the more difficult it is, the more satisfying you are when you finally beat it. I have 3 words to describe this boss. Combo, combo, combo. The first phase of this boss is relatively easy. His attack patterns are relatively simple to read and avoid. Don't get discouraged though, as his combos are still very dangerous, and can still shred through your health in a matter of seconds. Phase 2, however, is where this guy buffs himself with blood steroids and attacks with the rage of a main character whose theme song just came on. Heavy attack combos, powerful overhead strikes, dashing attacks that strike from a distance, this guy has it all. The arena is relatively decent in size, which allows for moderate mobility. However, this boss's movement speed is very quick, and he will chase you down with very little effort. There is almost no point in blocking this guy's attacks, as almost all of them will end up with a powerful overhead strike that will break your guard and make you vulnerable to his next barrage of strikes. Being covered in armor does make him vulnerable to lightning though. So if you can keep your weapon buffed with electricity, you can deal some moderate damage back at him. This fight is just a race for damage output, and your opponent is going for the gold. Successor of the Throat. There's something about this fight that makes it all the more special. Is it the fact that Ava is singing throughout the entire fight? Is it the fact that the sun's beamed down from above? I don't know. What I do know is that this fight is great. It is a difficult fight that makes you think, should I dodge or not? That's the hidden factor I believe that is within this fight. While you can be infected with Leak, which drains your Ichor, the real battle is trying to figure out whether to dodge or not. Some of her attacks seem to only hit you if you do dodge, while others just glance over you. That's the real fight here. It's the fight against your own practices in this game. Learning which attack you can dodge and which you can glance over is the hidden gem, which makes this a good challenge. That's not to say, however, that you shouldn't dodge. Ava can deal some pretty good damage and will likely have your stamina in the red the entire fight with her constant bombardment of attacks. She strikes from below, above, and all around, so be sure to keep an eye on the sand to know which attack is coming. Ava is, however, weak to ice attacks, so enhancing your weapon with ice or using ice gifts when you have the Ichor to do so is really the best way to defeat her. So number 13, I have the Virgin Born. The final boss of the story you'd think would be the queen herself, right? Well, you kind of get that. Just a really demented version of her. So this thing is massive. After defeating Silva, the protector of the people, all of the relics from the queen are drawn into his body, transforming him into this massive monstrosity. High elemental resistance, very powerful attacks from above, heavy defense from the sides and rear forcing you to strike from the front, a strike from the queen in the form of a massively nearly unavoidable strike, a fast projectile aimed directly at you, and an AoE attack that punishes you for staying too close to it for too long. A laser beam on top of that strikes everything in front of it, and being taller than you so half of your attacks can't even hit it. This fight is tough. All of this thing's attacks are heavy hitting and consistent. You will find yourself struggling to find an opening where you can have 2 seconds to heal. Having high stagger resistance is definitely essential for this, it will keep you moving, but you still have to manage your stamina and healing perfectly in this fight. I just wish we fought the queen in a real fight, rather than a demented version of her. That would have made this battle so much more satisfying. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this one, but I don't really care. Yeah, I know. Come on, I can't be the only one who didn't think of Hatsune Miku when I first saw this thing. I mean, look at it! Look at it! Look at it! Look at it! The Invading Executioner. Oh man, where to start with this thing? I must have died more to this than any other boss in this game. Her attacks are fast, have actually moderate range, and can take your entire health bar in one combo if you're not fast enough. There's a lot of speed required for this fight, and that's what the boss really doesn't seem to like. So, she puts the slow effect on you. What does that do? Makes you stand still so that she can destroy you. Nearly all of her attacks can place the slow effect on you, making you an easier target for her to wreck. That's the challenge of this fight. Also, her dash attack into a spinning strike move is painfully dangerous. It's fast, and if you're unlucky to avoid her dash strike, then you're going right where she wants you to go. Make sure you have slow cleansing items with you in this fight, and be prepared for a lot of death. The concert has begun, and you will dance. 今すぐによ So number 15, Juzo Mido. The experiment head who went corrupt with perfection. This guy is all about damage and lots of it. All of his attacks can stagger you. Most of his attacks can break your guard, and while his attacks are slow to an extent, his damage is insane. This guy is capable of killing you with a single strike. The first phase of this fight is quite difficult. While his attacks don't really have the greatest range, they have a massive punch behind them. Your health is going to get depleted very quickly in this battle if you're not careful enough. His ability to combo a lot of his attacks together, and he makes good use of them. If you stand in front or off to the side of him, you're going to get caught in his combo and your health is going to decrease very quickly. The second phase of this, once you get his health down to about 50% or so, oh my gosh, you are dead. His sword becomes active, his range and damage increase massively. He gains a dash attack which is quickly followed by a nearly unavoidable wide swing. Get hit by either of those and your health is going to 0. To make matters even worse, he can also inhibit you and your partner, preventing you from healing each other or using defensive abilities. You know Ganondorf in Smash Brothers? You know that build-up sword strike damage that he can do? Mido can dish out 4 times that damage in a fraction of the time. Keeping your heals saved for precise moments and knowing how he will strike you is key for this fight. It took me several tries before I finally figured out his movements, but even then, it was still painfully difficult to beat this guy. One slip-up and you are screwed. Mido, you are in the shadows for the majority of the story, and your legacy of torment will be destroyed from history. Beating you was so damn satisfying. So, if you thought Mido was painful, then you're in for a rude awakening. The Skull King is just as annoying and easily just as powerful. Wielding 2 long-range swords, the Skull King can attack multiple times and almost always ends it with a powerful strike that can take out a relatively large chunk of your health. Blocking his lighter attacks is possible, but his heavy attacks, you should try to dodge those at all costs, assuming you have stamina left. That's part of the challenge. His attacks drain your stamina and they drain it fast. Not only are his swords a problem, but he also wields a blood veil, dashing forward with 2 hounds who will rip you to shreds if you get caught in their teeth. Okay, I've got a second where I can heal. He missed his attack, so now it's my time to... Oh, come on! Healing in this battle is very risky. Silva can jump at you from across the map and strike you when you're vulnerable. To make the difficulty even greater, once you deal about 40% of his health, he will add blood charges to his attacks, increasing their damage and giving you something else to worry about for the remainder of the fight. If you manage to survive that, he gets even stronger and casts blood in an increased rate all around his being, masking his movements, which makes it more difficult to know when to dodge. He also gains an overhead attack that can reach anywhere on the map. If you don't dodge this, you will die instantly. This guy takes everything you've learned from the game and turns it against you, and he does it so well. This fight is a pain in the ass, but when you finally manage to defeat him, oh man, there is almost nothing more satisfying in this game than that. Silva, you were a great warrior, but in the end, you unfortunately had to fall. Alright, so we're down to the final boss on this list. There's 2 bosses. Wait, what do you mean, bosses? Yeah, it's these 2. The Cannoneer and the Blade Bearer. You're used to fighting single bosses where it's 2 against 1, right? Well, not this time. Now it's 2 against 2, and they put up a fight. After finally reaching Mido, he defends himself with one last obstacle in your past. 2 minions who serve only him, his personal bodyguards. Let's kick this off with the Cannoneer. Large size and utilizes fire attacks. Has an AoE burst attack that will knock you away from him if you get too close to him. A flamethrower that will rip you apart if you get caught in the torrent of flame. A ball of fire and metal which he tosses into the air only to come crashing down on you a moment later. Only upside to this guy is that he is very large and doesn't really roam around the map too often. All of his attacks are from a distance, with the exception of a hand smash attack, and they are annoying. Watch your feet for an eruption under them, as that large guy just lit the floor on fire. You definitely have to keep on your toes if this guy is still alive. Also, the music that plays during this fight, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Energetic, full of action, full of determination, it's perfect. Here, take a listen. Now onto the Blade Bearer. While the cannon-wielding fire guy won't move much around the map, this frost-wielding Asuna wannabe will dash around the area. Quick sword strikes and powerful ice pillars and strikes are what this swordswoman brings to the fight. Follow that up with a dance around the map, which turns into a fast cross-map strike or quick strike when you're least expecting it, and this boss will definitely be knocking you down. While fighting these two with a partner is the best way to go, you need to stay vigilant. The enemies will likely target one of you respectively, and then switch at certain times who their target is. Keeping aware of who is targeting you is the best advice I can give you for this fight. Also, just because you beat one doesn't mean the fight is over. Once one is dealt with, the other is still around. If it's the Cannoneer, you might be safe. Just avoid his flamethrower at all costs and be wary of his AoE attack when he tries to knock you back. If the Blade Bearer remains, keep on your feet and don't get caught off guard by her still fast attacks. Fire resistance is one buff I would definitely recommend. Keeping the fire damage to a minimum so you can focus on the Blade Bearer is the way to go.